Hello there, YouTube viewers. Dr. Bob's Last Chance Garage here. I make videos when my cars and trucks are broken and I need to fix them, and I think it might be worthwhile to show you what it takes to do that. Well, nothing's been broken for a long time, so I haven't had any chance to make a video and show you anything. But that's all changed. Things are now broken. So come along. My first task is to fix the fuel pump on this 1987 Jeep J-20. It's got the AMC 360 V8 motor. It's got the original fuel pump, I think, and I'll explain to you why I think it needs replacing. So come along. Now, the fuel system on an AMC 360 or any other AMC V8 is pretty rudimentary. It's got a mechanical fuel pump. Pumps it through a fuel filter and into the carburetor. Can't really see it, but underneath, right over here, is something that looks like this. It's a lever-activated fuel pump that runs off a cam on the front of the camshaft. That lobe is bolted on the front of the sprocket, and it activates this lever, and that makes a pump inside there work. Goes from the inlet to the outlet. Now, you can barely see the pump down here. You can see the outlet right there. The inlet is right next to it. I'll show you a better shot of it in a second. It's held on by 2 bolts down below. And the fuel line from the outlet runs up in a metal line, makes a bend, comes back around, and enters the fuel filter. The fuel filter is an external type with a 5/16 inlet and 2 outlets. A 5/16 outlet that goes to a hard line that goes over to the carburetor. You see that right there. And then a return line, a 1/4-inch fuel line that goes down, runs along the front of the motor, and there is down at the bottom a clamp that holds it. And that clamp is actually attached using one of the fuel pump mounting bolts. Now on these Jeeps, there's 2 fuel lines running back to the tank. The feed line, which is a 5/16 hard line, running to that 5/16 hose that goes into the inlet for the fuel pump. And that return line from the fuel filter attaches to this 1/4-inch hard line, goes all the way back to the tank. The next thing, if you can see, kind of hard to get under here, is the inlet for the fuel pump. That inlet is that 5/16 hose going up to that inlet nipple on the fuel pump. It's attached on this truck with a spring clamp. I find that works just fine for attaching that hose. It's under suction, not pressure, so you won't have pressurized fuel against it. And from here you can see one of those mounting bolts and the clamp for the fuel return line that is attached there with that mounting bolt. There's another identical mounting bolt on the right-hand side of that fuel pump. Hard to see here.
Surprise, surprise. From underneath, you actually can see the pump pretty well as both mounting bolts. So when you do reach under the power steering pump to access those bolts, if you were looking underneath, this is what you would see. Now there's a bunch of linkage and springs and everything in the way, but the fuel pump, though hidden from above, is pretty accessible from underneath.
The outlet from the pump to the fuel filter is a 1/2-inch tube nut right there, coming out of a flare fitting on the top of the fuel pump. I'm going to remove that first, then I'm going to remove that feed line held on by the spring clamp, and then I'm going to remove the 2 mounting bolts and pull that off. But first, I got to clean it up. I've already cleaned it up a bit, scraped it off and such. And That's the debris that was in and about the fuel pump and its mounting bolts. You don't want that getting into your engine. Not that that's a big risk, but you want it to be as clean as possible. As for where those mounting bolts are on the pump body, here's the one that has the bracket for the fuel return line, and here's the other one on the other side. It's buried deep in there, so you can't really see it, but you can get at it with an extension. Now, one thing to note, and I think this is something David Freiberger found out with his 1975 Jeep Cherokee, I believe it was, 74, whatever. It's a cool Jeep. But somebody mounted a newer pump on his Cherokee, and it's 360. Factory, it should be like this. There was some interference with the power steering pump bracket, which meant they had to bend things out of the way. Well, there's no reason to do that. You can get brand new pumps for either style. Get the one that matches your truck. Don't go adapting things if you don't have to. Another factor. New fuel pumps fail. They come out of the box bad. So, to hedge my bets, to come up with the best chance of having a working fuel pump out of the box, I went to BJ's Off-Road, who supplies full-size Jeep parts. That's where I got this Delphi part. Delphi, I believe, is a subsidiary of General Motors. Well, they have a better reputation than most for producing good quality products, and so that's what I'm using, a Delphi fuel pump. And you order that, it's about $45, $50, plus it has a gasket with it. It has generic instructions that don't tell you anything, really, but there's not much to tell. When you install it, you want to put a bit of lube here on the arm so that when it's rubbing against that cam on the front of the camshaft sprocket, it's not going to wipe out that lobe. You need a gasket to go between here. The kit I got had 2 gaskets, so if I mess up one, the other one will work. It's not under pressure, but there's going to be oil splashing up on there, and you need it sealed so you don't have a leak out the bottom. And then that's it. Do that, and then connect the fuel feed line right there. Connect the outlet right there, and it should be ready to run. All right, let's get to work. Let's remove that fuel line from the top of the pump. You can see it down here. It's the tube nut with the hose going up. And let me just give you for reference what it looks like on the new pump. That'd be this piece right here. So you see it's got a tube fitting, FLIR fitting, and that tube nut just screws in the top. So, first thing to do, clean it off, and then get the tube wrench on it. Give us the best chance to get it off without stripping it. Now there's not a lot of clearance in here to get that tube nut wrench on, so let's hope the flats on this wrench line up with the flats on the nut in a position I can actually loosen it from. Yeah, let's flip it over, see if that works. Ah, there we go. All right, let's give it a go. Now, let's give it a tap. In these situations, it's good to have a second tube wrench with slightly different locations for those flats. I heard some people think it's possible to have too many tools. Don't listen to those kinds of people in your life. Is that moving? Let's see if I can get it on the flats. 60 degrees from where it is right now. Because once it starts moving, oh, just so close. So close. Let's see if that other wrench has the flats in that position. Ah, there we go. Ah, look at that. It's moving. Once it starts moving, then you can just use a regular box wrench. You do not want to round off that nut. It's not going to be fun to try and remove using anything other than a wrench. While the brake cleaner will get that dirt off the threads, it doesn't lubricate those threads. And those threads I'm going to have to use to attach this nut to the new pump. So, just work it back and forth a little bit with some lubricant on it. And turn it 1/6 of a turn at a time. Now, just while I'm loosening this nut, if you are inclined to replace this metal line with some rubber hose and a barb fitting, I recommend against it. If that is easier, but the factory runs metal line for a reason. In fact, sanctioning bodies require that you have no more than a certain amount of rubber line under the hood. The reason for that is that metal line is less likely to leak than a rubber line, which can crack and dry up and bulge and split and all that. It's not that metal never fails, but it fails much less often. And your manufacturers, they don't want it to fail under their watch while you got a warranty. They don't want to recall anything. I guess Ford hasn't remembered that lesson as of recent. But the goal is 0 defects, 0 leaks while in warranty. There we go. All right, that's off. Now time to remove the inlet. Actually, you can almost see the inlet right there. There's the inlet pipe, there's the inlet hose, and there's that spring clamp holding that hose onto that inlet pipe, this part right here. So, all I got to do is get a pair of pliers on that spring clamp and pull it down and wiggle that hose off of there. Okay, time to remove that hose, the fuel feed hose, the 5/16 fuel feed hose from the tank to the pump. On mine, I just have a spring clamp, which is enough since it's not under pressure, it's under vacuum. And I have a nice little angled pair of pliers I bought, I don't know where. They were cheap and they're real useful for things where you need just a slight angle. Alright, had to reposition you. The camera slipped. The hose end was out of frame. Grab it. Twist. You can use regular pliers if that's all you have, but these hose pliers are really nice. Alright, highly recommended. Now, this will take a 9/16 socket, and you want one that's not going to have a real thick wall because it's got to slip between the pump body and the clamp and get on that nut. So, I'm using about a 6-inch extension. All right, I can't even see it. I'm going to go for this inner bolt. I can get my socket on there. It's directly opposite this outer bolt. There we go. And I've got a big breaker bar. No, not a big breaker bar, but a flex head socket on there. Once you break it free, it moves pretty easy. In fact, you could almost spin it off by hand. While I've got you in frame, I'm going to go for this front bolt. Just have to break it free. And it too will basically spin out by hand. Once they're loose, There is, in fact, quite a bit of space to remove it. So here is that inner one. Here's that front one that has the clamp for that fuel return on it. There you go. Now that pump is free, let's pop it off there. Stuck to the gasket, comes right off. I'm living a charmed life. The old gasket came off complete from the block. Cleaning that off is going to be a lot of fun. You can see the wear mark for that lever where it rides against that cam bolted to the front. I'll explain to you in a second why I'm replacing this pump, even though my engine still runs. Now, why would I replace a pump that's still working? Well, a few things. First, when this pump was built, there was no ethanol in our fuel. Since it works by means of a rubber diaphragm activated by this lever, the rubber diaphragm in here may in fact degrade in the presence of ethanol. And so if you have E90 or E10 or whatever, you've got more ethanol in your fuel than this diaphragm was designed to work with. So it can degrade over time and fail. A second reason is that I think this may already have failed. Let me show you the second reason why I might want to replace this pump. I do oil changes on a semi-regular basis. I make sure when I fill my engine, oil reads right near the top of the fill level. Partly because this thing leaks like a sieve. But also, you can tell other things, because sometimes the oil level doesn't go down, but rather the oil level goes up. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but the oil level is reading right about there. And you say to yourself, how do you add oil on a truck that leaks oil? Did you add more oil since the last oil change? And I say, no, I haven't. What's happened, possibly, is that the fuel coming in here may leak past the diaphragm down into the pump body and into the crankcase through this opening right there. And if that's the case, you're going to get fuel in your oil. Your oil pressure will drop as you drive. You'll have poor fuel economy because it's going into your oil sump rather than into your engine. But more importantly, you're going to dilute your oil and possibly damage bearings. So, if my fuel pump is leaking, replacing it will solve it. If it isn't leaking, the ethanol in the fuel is probably going to make it start leaking in the near future. So since this Delphi pump is built using modern ethanol-resistant materials, replacing the pump that was on the truck with this one will head off that problem.
To confirm my suspicions, I made this little test setup on the back of my truck. I put some fuel in that hose and moved the lever with my vice grip. Let's see what happens.
Yep, sure enough, I got fuel leaking past that diaphragm into the crankcase, diluting my oil. I'm amazed it worked. Must be a small leak. But that's enough to start filling your oil pan with gasoline, diluting your oil. Eventually the diaphragm's going to rupture entirely. And it'll fail to pump any fuel at all. I was kind of amazed it still worked. Must be a small tear in it. And in case you've never seen the inside of one of these fuel pumps, this lever is going to move a diaphragm inside. That just goes up and down. And that draws fuel in the inlet. So there should be a one-way check valve here. And then pushes it out up the outlet to the carburetor. And again, that should be a one-way check valve, not allowing any fuel to flow back into the fuel pump. I can't see if that's good or if that's failed. But in any case, I'll tell you what has failed. The rubber on this diaphragm has failed. It's cracked and not absolutely split all the way through. I bet it's a factory pump, so they had reinforced rubber. Tell there's some kind of cords in there that they used. But through those cracks, fuel was leaking down into the crankcase, diluting my oil. Eventually, this crack would have gotten bigger and bigger and would have split entirely. So, the new Delphi pump has rubber that is compatible with ethanol because ethanol will accelerate the wear and deterioration of rubber like this if it wasn't designed to work with ethanol. All right. Now you know.
All right, let's get that on. And all it's going to take is a gasket and 2 bolts. Now, if my gasket had stuck to the block and not come entirely off with the fuel pump, then this mating surface over here, I'd have to scrape it off. As it is, a rag with some brake clean will make it clean enough for me to put on the new gasket. Now, this Delphi kit came with 2 gaskets, and frequently a kit will come with multiple gaskets to accommodate a set of different applications that require slightly different gaskets. These gaskets are identical. So, I guess I have a backup. I get to test out something. The philosophy of how you install gaskets. Do you install them dry or do you coat each side with some sealant? Well, the advantage of coating each side with some sealant is that you know it's not going to leak. The disadvantage is that it's going to stick behind when you remove the pump. Now, am I ever going to remove this pump? I don't know. But I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try it just dry and see if it seals. Because then if it seals and I ever do need to remove the pump, perfect. If it doesn't seal, I'll just take it off and use the extra gasket. And here's another little tip. This is something you don't have to do it with assembly lube, but I've got assembly lube and I don't have much opportunity. I don't have much opportunity to use the assembly lube. I don't have much opportunity to build engines these days. Just light coating on that pump arm. Make sure it's clean, there's no debris on it. That'll give your pump a chance of living long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the gasket in place. I'm going to slide a bolt through there to hold it in place, then put it up into the opening in the block. There really is no good angle to show this process. So the best I'm going to do is reach up under here and try to get that one bolt started, and then come back and get the other bolt started with the clamp around it. Got that one bolt started, but now I got to line up the gasket as well as that clamp for the return line. Now, probably the best bet for getting that return line clamp on the bolt lined up is to stick the bolt through it just a tiny bit and then slide it up into place until you get to that mounting boss with the hole. Get it started in that hole and then make sure that gasket's in place. Am I lucky? Did it sit right in place on the first try? Let's see. Indeed it did. Let me see if I can show you this miracle. Way down there, you can see the bolt and the clamp, and between the bolt and the clamp and the hose, you can see my gasket is lined up. Let's see if this gives you a better view. There we go. There's the gasket lined up. Now, I actually went looking for some torque figures of what the factory says to torque this to. And try as I might, I couldn't find anything. I'm going to guess it's about 25 to 35 foot-pounds, because that's normally what 3/8 inch bolts are torqued to. You want them good and tight. Now, connecting everything else is pretty much the opposite of what you did to take it apart. This part right here, this nut, it's going to be a little tricky, but because there's a good chance of stripping it out if you get it started at the wrong angle. But luckily, there's a lot of play in this line. Right now, there's still a lot of junk in between that nut and the tube. I'll try to clean it out with some brake cleaner. Because now the brake cleaner can go through that nut. Still a little tight. Must be some dirt in there. So, I could remove the thing entirely, but I don't think that's necessary. You would like this fitting to spin as free as possible. If it's dirty, it's not going to spin freely. But just work it back and forth a little bit. Spray a little bit. Soon you'll be able to get it to move freely on its own. That's a lot better now. Okay. Now I can spin it by hand at least. Still a little tight though. Oh, look at that. Look how filthy that is under there. Let's wipe that off. Let's try that now. Oh, look at that. Still some junk and corrosion there, but that's easily cleaned off. Look at that. Much better. That's how you want that nut to spin before you try to thread it onto that fuel pump. Okay, now let's get that thread started. I think no matter which way I hold this camera, it's going to get blocked. So when it's going on straight, it's just going to spin easy. In fact, you can hold the thread, you can hold that tube up a bit and get that nut started. Even though it spins freely, there's no room to get my fingers around it. And try this. Try gently turning it with a 1/2-inch wrench. Just finger pressure. Anything more, you risk stripping the threads, which, needless to say, you don't want to do. And again, you don't need a tube nut wrench for this part just to get it started. There's just no way to get a finger on there to get it started. Now let's see, I've turned it a 1/2 turn. Let's see if that's enough to have the threads engage. You can tell if you can lift on the nut, lift on the tube, and it doesn't come out. Yeah, it's started. Perfect. Just tighten that down till it needs some force, then use the tube wrench to cinch it home. One-sixth of a turn at a time. Lots of fun. At least you know it's not stripped. Okay, we're getting down where I think the flare is engaged. Yep. Now it's time for the tube wrench. And you just tighten it till it's tight. It's tight. Now just slip the feed line up onto the nipple for the inlet. Barely can see that. Maybe use my handy hose pliers to wiggle it up. Yep. That's as high as that's going to go. I trust you'll see what I'm doing here with the spring clamp coming all the way up. Oh, too far. Danger of doing it blind. You want it past the bulge, but not past the end of the hose. So about 1/4 inch from the end of the hose is good. Right there. Like I said, that hose is under suction. So it's not so much about keeping pressure, keep the fuel in. All right, that's it. New fuel pump's installed. You can see it from under here, how it looks. The bracket, the hose connected, that tube nut installed. That's it. So, let's test it, see if it runs. But it hasn't run in a while. Well, I got around to this. So I've got to prime the fuel system. And I do this, well, I did it because maybe the fuel pump was leaking. But for any car that sits for a long period of time, the modern gasoline evaporates. And if you don't have a electric fuel pump, what you might face is a dry float bowl. So here's how I remedy the dry float bowl situation. You could use starting fluid. That sometimes can be kind of tough on your engine. Right here in the carburetor, you see these two holes. Those are the vent holes for the float bowl. I bought a set of these squirters. They're for use in a kitchen. Bought them from a kitchen supply place. Came in a pack of 4. One of them I use for gasoline. And they don't leak. It's been there for a year, and I keep it in a can, so if it should leak, it's not going to go anywhere. But they're both connected, so there's no reason to fill both holes. I get some fuel in there, and now I start up the engine. And if it runs dry after a few seconds of running, I know my fuel pump is not pumping. But if the float bowl fills up and the engine continues to run, I know I've solved the problem. And my fuel pump is working properly. And I'm also going to keep an eye on that fuel pump, make sure it's not going to leak from that new fitting. Well, leak from that fitting right there. It's not new. It's new to this truck, but not new absolutely speaking. Let's not get too metaphysical here. All right. Let's start her up and see what happens. And you let me know if there's stuff pumping out of that hose. All right. No leaks. I'd say that's a job well done. My fuel pump's replaced. That diaphragm in there should be good for many more years, no matter what they put in the fuel systems we have to deal with these days. I'll call that a win. All right, so if you need to replace the fuel pump on your FSJ, don't be afraid. It's not a huge job. It's a little dirty, but you do have space. You have to look underneath this power steering pump to get that space, but you do have space. Just a few things you have to be careful about, and it looks like my gasket is not leaking. So, I'm happy. All right. I'm going to change the oil on this because this is half gasoline and half oil. Well, that's it. Enjoy your day. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you found this useful. Take care now.